Greetings and welcome to the City of Saco City Council meeting for January 3rd, 2022. Congratulations and welcome and Happy New Year to you all. With that, I'd like to recognize that all city councilors are present, and at this time, we'll ask you to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 3 of the agenda, item 4 of the agenda, which is general. Tonight we get the opportunity under item A to recognize a gentleman who's done a lot of work in the community, and that gentleman is Rob Biggs. So wherever you are, Rob, please stand up so everyone can see you, and now I'm just going to share some words. Rob Biggs has dedicated the last 6 years to improving his community through Saco Main Street. Rob worked to grow the events that were already established and create an additional events such as music in the parking lot and cabin fever reliever. When Main Street's ice cream stand was going to close, Rob saw an opportunity to build a new ice cream shop and store. The Scoop is a place where both Saco residents and visitors can meet and enjoy a cold treat. Rob has changed Saco Main Streets in all the ways that will live on for generations to come. On behalf of all of us, I want to thank you, Rob, for your 6 years serving as Saco Main Street's Executive Director. At this time, we will have a Saco Main Street presentation.
We can take it off here.
You can take it, mask.
Thank you. Well, with that, I took half of my speech. So, anyways, want to start out, we're going to do a 1 year in review. Molly Donlan, the program director for Saco Main Street, is going to run through that, and then I'm going to kind of do a little 6 year in review as well from there. So, with that said, it's up there, good. We'll start out here. Enter. Oh. No? Let's go with the mouse, see if that works. Everything was working so well. There we go. All right, it's pretty simple, as I say here. Every day is your chance to make the city a little bit better. That's what we do. Waking up every morning, our whole focus is to help Saco connect with the community members as well as the businesses here in our community and make it more vibrant. Why is this not going any further? Thank you, Molly.
I'll just handle the buttons.
All right. Anyways, the mission of Saco Main Street obviously is to help make Saco a great place to live, work by enhancing the downtown vitality. We don't need to read the rest. We are a 501(c) nonprofit, and we work with all the various organizations within Saco. COVID-19, we'll briefly talk about that. It certainly wasn't on our radar when we ran into 2020, much like Brian Cainwright, our city administrator, who started, and about 3 or 4 weeks later, it was like, hey, Brian, your life has changed. That 90-day plan, just throw it away and start over, which is kind of what we did. But we had to come up with various ideas and ways that we could really keep the vibrancy in our downtown without having face-to-face contact. And I think we were pretty successful in doing the best we could. We'll move on from there. Boom. And with that, I'm going to let Molly take off and give our 1 year in review.
All right, so we kicked it off with our Bark in the Park, our 4th year, and after 2020, we weren't really sure what was going to happen in terms of attendance and in terms of commitment from people showing up and vendors and sponsors, but we soon realized that everyone was eager to get back outside and get back together and enjoying our outdoor events. So we kicked it off with that. And then we set a record here in Saco for Maine's longest banana split at 120 feet, which was a messy, sticky day of fun. We had over 50 volunteers help to put it together. It came together with 161 individual banana splits built inside of a plastic gutter. Took about 10 minutes to complete and was featured on 3 radio spots and 2 TV segments, as well as numerous articles online, and we can officially hold that crown away from Portland. Music in the Park came back. It's our 4th year for that as well, and even though we got rained out a couple of times, not to worry because we added music in Jubilee Park this year, so we had additional music happening downtown this summer. Our 50th annual Sidewalk Arts Festival was the most successful year for our artists and downtown merchants in terms of profit and traffic into their shops. The attendees that came out were eager to get involved and buy art. Our 11th annual Classic Car Show had over 150 cars in attendance. There were cars everywhere, people everywhere, and overall was a great sunshiny day. New this year, we partnered with the Q97.9 Morning Show for their Cans for a Cure program. In 3 hours, Saco filled half a U-Haul with cans and bottles for their drive, all of that going to fund breast cancer research. And again, landing Saco a spot on the morning radio show. Our 20th annual Pumpkin Harvest Festival had over 50 vendors, live music and performances, pie eating contests, and the virtual costume contest kept the buzz going after the event. Our scavenger hunt, which was new this year, brought new business to downtown merchants, one shop claiming she had 15 new customers in her door thanks to the game. Our 10th annual Holiday Festival and Light Parade was our longest ever parade at 1 hour and 5 minutes long. We separated the tree lighting to the night before so that we would give people more space to enjoy that event without rushing from the festival to the parade. And we found that crowd size grew at the tree lighting substantially. Some great photos. You might recognize a face or two in there. We also painted Saco's first painted crosswalk downtown during the Pumpkin Harvest Festival, which got news coverage across the state. And we continue to put Saco on the map. Our social media, Facebook presence of over 7,000 people. We've also added Instagram. We've been featured on ABC, CBS, and Fox, as well as Q97.9. We were Maine Downtown Center's Project of the Year for the Saco Scoop, and we received the Heartbeat of the Community Award from Saco Biddeford Savings, to name a few. Here's a few articles from the Banana Split event. That's our U-Haul full of cans and bottles with Lori Vornis from the Q Morning Show, as well as a couple articles from various events throughout the year. Some projects we worked on, our scarecrows went back on parade. You might recognize Sailor Moon there. We also put the flags back up on Main Street, are continuing to improve the flower planters across Main Street. Post Office Park was built 2 years ago, and we've enhanced the holiday lighting downtown. And really one of our major kind of things that we do is connecting businesses and helping with business vitality. So our Small Business Saturday is just one of the ways we do this, as well as helping new businesses as they're planning to open and in their early stages of opening. We had 12 new businesses open since the start of the pandemic, which is incredible. We have 0 vacancies on Main Street right now. And we started to bring our merchants together through a program called Main Street Matters, where we meet and talk about the needs downtown and introduce the merchants to one another so that we can create a more connected community. And these are just a few of the ribbon cuttings we've done in the last year or so since the pandemic. Our Small Business Saturday, we gave away 250 $5 Saco bucks, which helped increase awareness of the downtown businesses and is sponsored by some of our more non-traditional businesses. This year we had a 70% return of Saco bucks, which is the highest we've had in previous years. And coming up in the future, we are starting to build our adaptive biking program in collaboration with age-friendly Saco. You can see the bike here as a way to help get our seniors in the local Saco community out and about for some fun rides on a bike. We're also looking to do some public art programs and wayfinding, improving some of the signage that is already downtown and adding new. We've talked about doing a downtown map kiosk to highlight some of the businesses and some of the public art that is around town, as well as adding lights to Post Office Park and various sculptures and murals around Main Street. We are also in the process of getting a downtown speaker system, which will help in the case of emergencies, as well as for events and just generally adding to the mood downtown. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Biggs.
So this is my last report as the Executive Director of Saco Main Street. I want to say it's been a great run for 6 years. While it's been a lot of work, it's sure been a lot of fun as well. Not long after I moved here, I had a job offer with a significant compensation and travel, but in discussion with my wife, Susan, I told her I could look back in 5 years and say, wow, I sold 750,000 acres of plastic laminate, or maybe, just maybe, could change the face of downtown Saco, and I'm glad I chose Saco. I always think that there's much more to be done, but as I've looked back recently, I've come to realize that we really did have an impact here in Saco. My dad always said, leave it better than you found it when you leave, and I think that we did. So, why do you invest in Saco Main Street? And this is what we're going to talk about a little bit. And I'm going to repeat a little bit of what Molly did, but you really need to look back to where we came from as well as where we are today. And basically, it's your return on investment. It's your money that you invest, our sponsors invest, our volunteers invest their time, make a significant difference in the downtown. So just some bullet points that I'm kind of proud of. She mentioned 7,000 people. When we started in 2016, we had 950 people on our Facebook, so we've made some significant strides. And many of our posts, the more popular ones, will hit out to 25,000 people. Television, before Saco Main Street started their efforts in 2016, we'd not been on TV. We've been on TV 29 different segments on network news, including one that came with Chronicle out of Boston. They came up to talk about our Adirondacks on Main Street. She mentioned Maine's longest banana split. I heard we were recently challenged by the folks that owned the record before at 60 feet, and they only made it to 100. So I think there may be a move to push it to 240 just to push it out of anybody's reach in the future. Music in the park. So 5 years ago, we didn't really have music in downtown Saco. Since then, we've had 6 nights with over 250 to 300 in attendance. The last 2 years, we started out, the very first night was Delilah Papour, who is the executive director of Heart of Biddeford. We had 75 people that night, so we've grown pretty well. And then again, Bark in the Park. The reason we did that was just to try to get some different demographics of folks that weren't attending, say, our music or our art festival or our pumpkin harvest festival. And it did, is we've got folks that are, I mean, all ages are coming. Everybody has a dog or likes a dog. And then the 50th annual Sidewalk Art Festival, my career mission was not to be the guy that killed the art festival before we hit 50. We've done that, and as Molly mentioned, it was our most successful, both for the artists as well as the folks in attendance. I think what we've noticed more than anything is that people were just looking for something to do outdoors that felt safe. The Classic Car Show, again, started with 50 cars in 2016, and we're up over 150 with a ton of people coming downtown. And people have just said more and more, the folks that bring the cars, just how much they enjoy it. Pumpkin Harvest Festival. I was here as a board member in October, the first year in 2015, and I saw 25 pumpkins and about 750 people, and I thought, man, we can do better than this. And this last year, we had 3,500 people attend, with over 450 pumpkins that were generously donated by Leary Farms and decorated by all the kids in the Saco school system. And then finally, the Holiday Festival and Parade of Lights. I mean, an hour and 5 minutes is fantastic. From what I'm told, that we are the longest light parade in the state of Maine at this point, and we need to keep that up. Letters to Santa. This is something we did during the pandemic since we couldn't have the light parade or the holiday festival. And in speaking with Santa recently in 2021, he wrote 250 letters and over 300 letters this year, individually customized to the children in Saco, but also as far away as Kentucky and throughout Maine. And then finally, the Cabin Fever Reliever was a great event that we have. It was a one-time event, but we had it in the mill, and it was a significantly younger demographic from as far away as Lewis and Auburn, as well as New Hampshire and northern Massachusetts, and was directly responsible for Pacifico Restaurant. Alejandra and Carlos came to me after standing there for several hours serving some of our guests and said, "This would be an awesome place for a restaurant. How can you help us, and who can we talk to about doing this?" And away we go. And I think that anybody that's been there would deem it as a success. It's been a great opportunity for them. The mill is now filled up, which is much to our demise of the Cabin Fever Reliever, so we're looking for another location in the future. And finally, some of the physical enhancements. Post Office Park was one that every time I walked by there to get my mail for Saco Main Street, I thought, geez, what is this dirt here for, and why is it not doing anything for our downtown? And so in talking with the postmistress, she said, well, at first I asked her if she would get permission, which she didn't really want to do, so she said, "I think we should just do it," and which we did. The bricks came from Saco. They were generously donated from our brick memorial, or our pile of bricks, the brick cemetery. And then we had a local contractor that graded it, installed the bricks. The benches were generously donated by citizens as well as some businesses. And then Kurt Scammon dropped off a couple loads of sod that we put down, and it's been great. It's been a great addition to our downtown. Flags on Main Street, that was, to me, I just wanted to illustrate where Main Street was, and it's turned out quite well, and we've put Maine flags as well as U.S. flags, and I think it's been a great addition. Adirondacks on Main Street were great for 3 years. Unfortunately, COVID killed our supplier. Well, not killed our supplier, but they definitely shut them down for a while, which was the Maine State Prison. That's been working out great, and hopefully that'll come back as that prison fires up their prison industries program again. And finally, the new planter program. I think everybody will agree that it's been a great addition to our downtown. We're going to add a few more next year as well, just to finish up the northern part of Main Street. But they're large, they're visible, people love them, and they've been a great addition to downtown. We talked about scarecrows on parade. That was one of our answers to COVID, and it has worked out quite well, and there's been a lot of people that have asked us, "Hey, you're going to bring it back? We'd like to do one." The enhanced holiday lighting, I think you've seen all the poles that have been wrapped, and then this year, with money from our TIF and working with Denise Clavette, Economic Development Director, we added the one that went across the street where our banner was normally, and that's been a great addition. A lot of good feedback from that. And then finally, the painted crosswalk. Unfortunately, it was painted with the pavement was a little cold and the paint didn't stick as well as we thought. So it'll be redone next June during our art festival when the street is shut down, and we'll probably add a few more as well. We talked about Saco Bucks. Molly mentioned that, but just to tell you, it's injected over $6,000 of actual dollars into our downtown businesses through the Saco Bucks program. And the money that we gave away came from our businesses, but they were the non-traditional sponsors, folks like law firms, insurance companies, real estate firms, and so on. And the Saco Scoop, I think we've talked about that before. Most everybody here has been there at least once. Hopefully you'll go back again. We could use the business in February and March. And then 10 vacant storefronts in 2015, and they're now all full occupancy. 2 have not yet opened yet, but every space in our downtown Main Street first floor is now leased. And then finally, Main Street Matters. Molly mentioned it, but it's a program that we put together during the pandemic to connect our businesses virtually so they would understand a little bit more about each other. And we've had great success with that as well. And then finally, we get to this page here. That my family moved to Maine on a whim, but we chose Saco intentionally. It had an authentic downtown, a beach, a beautiful house. And as I've often said, when we moved here to Saco, it felt like your favorite flannel shirt, warm and comfortable. The people were very open and welcoming. I got to thank Peg Poulin first. When I asked her how I could get more involved with my local community, she mentioned that I should join the board of this thing called Saco Main Street. 4 months later, I became the executive director. Little did she or I know what I was getting involved with. And I've got to thank my wife, Susan, and my daughters, Ripley and Jordan, as they have sacrificed many a weekend to help me with a festival or scooping ice cream at the Saco Scoop. I want to thank the Saco Main Street Board, all the past members, sponsors, and numerous volunteers that have supported some of my many wacky ideas. Additionally, I can't forget city staff, public works, parks and recreation, as well as Saco police and fire departments. And I want to thank Andrew Dickinson for his great photography, and some of which we use today. None of this could be done alone. As they say, it takes a village. A merchant recently said to me, "You just poured gas on Saco, lit a match, and ran like your hair was on fire." And I think that pretty much sums it up. And finally, I want to thank Holly Gordon, who one day walked into the office and said, "I live here in Saco, and I want to know if you need any help." She, like me, didn't know what she was getting into when she said that. I'm glad she said yes and stayed with us. We couldn't have done it without her. And then finally, for City Council, of course, none of this could have happened without the support of mayors and City Council, both past and present, who have helped me put it all together, and I thank you all for that. And finally, my message to City Council is that we need to continue to make great things happen. Saco deserves your best, not disagreements or divisive politics. I ask that you please put any differences aside and band together for the greater good of Saco. Saco needs you all to work together hard and do good things for the good of all of Saco. Saco is a great city of opportunity, and you have a chance to, as I said earlier, leave it better than you found it. Do the right thing, not the comfortable thing. Make decisions that build up Saco, not bring it down. Be bold and do not settle. I am sure you all love Saco as much as I do, and if we all continue to work together, don't take no for an answer, and pull in the same directions, Saco can shine. Keep pushing, and always remember, Saco, it's happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you again for that, and thank you again for your service to the community. Moving on to item 5 of the agenda, committee correspondence to council. Any committee correspondence at this time? No committee correspondence at this time. Brings us to item 6, public comment. For those that would like to speak during public comment, please come forward and be heard. State your name and address for the record, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes. You may remove your mask when at the podium.
Barbara Coleman, 386 Buxton Road, Saco. As board members and school board members, you should have received a number of documents via email late this afternoon in reference to what I'm going to say. The question of ownership of the new school, as stated by the Superintendent Ray, is the school department would have ownership. Not accepting this answer, in my normal fashion, I dived in and researched. Was this a true or false statement for the city of Saco? I spoke with the DOE facilities person, Scott Brown. By making the call, I was not jeopardizing the funding of the school. The true answer is that we, as a municipality, the city and the school, need to join and work together in partnership on this major endeavor. Was the school board committee created in the sunshine? Or was it cherry-picked behind the scenes? Announcing during one meeting is different than seeking input from numerous groups via email surveys, notices, surveys, placing an application on the website for members to join the building committee. Suggestion is a more thorough process to be accomplished in the light in a legal manner to allow inclusiveness of Saco citizens and experts. Even the DOE policies on construction mention city departments to be included: code enforcement, finance, planning, etc. Additionally, are there current or former teachers, other school staff, parents, the mayor on the committee? The answer is important to all citizens in Saco. Next as to what entity in the municipality, city, or school regarding the ownership of the building and the land. Saco is a home rule municipality as defined by 30-A M.R.S.A. Chapter 111. And I quote from that statute: home rule structure municipalities of towns and cities have broad powers of legislation and administration of their affairs under the state constitution. Ellipse. You can find the rest in the thing. Further, the Maine Supreme Court has held that the home rule statute constitutes an independent and preliminary grant of powers to municipalities to legislate on matters beyond those exclusively local and municipal. Saco City Charter, Section 1.02, Powers of the City, clearly says ownership of buildings and land is placed under the charter and council decides to approve or not the purchase. Saco City Code, Chapter 8, 81.1, definition: city-owned property includes land or buildings in which the city possesses the fee interest, including any land or building which the city legally acquires by foreclosure or tax or sewer liens. Fee interest means any building and land, structure improvements, and fixtures owned in fee simply by being the borrower or guarantor of the funds. The Saco City Council will decide if a bond is presented to the voters at a referendum. If the voters approve the bond, then the building and land will be owned by the city. Please, tonight, set a date to discuss this issue at length with legal counsel. Millions of dollars are going to be utilized on a school and land to last 50-plus years to educate our current and future children. A much-needed building. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Please come forward and be heard. State your name and address for the record, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Margot Johnson. I would like to thank the council for considering and taking action on the tax assistance program. It is a huge benefit to all Saco residents who qualify. I would also like to urge you to please remember that we need to communicate this to people. And Age-Friendly Saco is willing to do whatever we can. We'll help with the paperwork, but we need somebody from the city also to be part of that so that we can get the word out and people understand how to fill out the forms and what the qualifications would be. The tax work-off program, the problem with that was that it kind of ended. Nobody knew what had happened. And people were left hanging, and people that had worked hard to build up their hours, suddenly, they didn't know where they were going. So that's why I would really urge the communication. And again, thank you for the action and the thought that went into it.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Moving on from public comment. That brings us to item 7 of the agenda, and that is the approval of the minutes for December 6th and December 13th of 2021. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Councilor Hatch, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Berman. Any discussion on the minutes? Roll call vote on the minutes. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Minutes pass 7-0. Brings us to item 8, consent items. Of item A, confirm mayor's appointment to the Conservation Commission on page 2, and item B, application for solid waste permit, Maine Waste Solutions LLC on page 3. Is there a motion to approve the consent items?
So moved.
Councilor Berman, seconded by Councilor Hatch. Any discussion on the consent items? Seeing no discussion, roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Brings us to item 9, action items, and we have a joint meeting with the school board, and I'd like to invite the Saco School Board, those that have shown up here tonight, School Board Member Preble, School Board Member LaFortune, School Board Member Gale, School Board Member Truman, and School Board Member Johnston. Tonight, we will be bringing up City Solicitor Tim Murphy to do an ethics and FOIA training, but please remember that this is just an overview of the highlights and so forth, and you should really take it upon yourselves, council and school board, to go through MMA or MSMA for the additional trainings that they have on both ethics and FOIA, because it's a very important topic. So with that, City Solicitor Murphy, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. If I could ask a favor, keep this to probably 25 minutes maximum. So if you could, at 20 minutes, just tell me I'm 5 minutes to go, and I'll expedite and move along. No one wants to listen to me for more than 25 minutes, if that. Already 2/3 of the room have cleared out on the mere thought that they might have to listen to a lawyer. So I do thank the brave school board members who have chosen to stay. Thank you, I'm grateful. Hopefully I'll have a chance to introduce myself at some point to you, and thank the council as well for listening. I've gone through this a couple times, and I apologize that in advance of tonight I did not send you the typical materials that I've sent the council. I have prepared some talking points that I will make sure that you all get tomorrow, so that you have them as just a handy cheat sheet. But they are just that. They're a high-level kind of overview that you can use and refer to, but they won't replace, for instance, manuals that MMA prepares that dig into these issues in depth and which are very helpful. So I'll say this about ethics, and I'm going to start with ethics, and then the second half I'll talk about the Freedom of Access Act, which is the public records law that you all know of. But as to ethics, I think it's fairly easy and fair to say that ethical problems flag themselves for most of you and in most cases. Okay, they're not going to be mysteries. In most cases, you're not going to be confused about an ethical dilemma, because you'll have that little voice right there on your shoulder telling you. You're going to know it, okay? We all grew up with the golden rule, right? We know what it means. We're familiar with the 10 Commandments and all the other rules that we have to live by. So we have a pretty good sense already inside ourselves of what's ethical and what isn't. So the first point to take from this is, if in fact you get beyond that point, if you have a matter that is opaque, unclear, you're worried about, believe it or not, you have tremendous numbers of resources available to you. So on the city side, your councilors, you can discuss it with one another, or you can talk with the mayor. He certainly has been around here a good deal of time. The administrator's office is, again, another resource. And finally, if there's a question, you can send it along to me. Same with the school board. You have a superintendent, you have a chair that you can reach out to for guidance. Gee, have we ever faced this issue before? Geez, have we ever seen a matter like this at the school board? I don't recall it. Do we have an ethical issue? Do I need to act somehow? And so, to the extent you walk away tonight, walk away realizing you have resources that can help you when there is ambiguity. It's not going to happen very often, but almost in everyone's career on one of these boards or bodies, a matter will pop up. You'll know somebody who's going to be affected by a matter. Maybe you'll be affected by a matter. Maybe one of your spouses will be affected by a matter. My first year as city attorney, Mark Johnston was concerned about a particular contract and budget the council was going to vote on because one of the city councilors' wives was a school teacher. And so he was curious whether a city councilor could vote on a budget that involved the school board where a councilor's wife was on the school board. Is that in effect a vote to enhance the finances of someone's spouse? Very interesting question. And actually, I was quite glad Mark raised it. Now, on the other hand, he didn't like the answer he got, but so be it. That's how we do it. We call balls and strikes. So things will pop up in your careers here where you may have a legitimate question. We may have confronted it before, we may not. But don't be afraid to ask. All right? You have resources available to you. Now, state law tends to look at two particular areas that they view as important as regards to ethics. The first is conflicts of interest. That's like the school board issue, where you have some inherent self-interest that should or may prevent you from acting on a matter. The key about these, about anything where your self-interest is involved, and the lesson point I'd have you take away tonight is, first of all, disclose it. If for instance, you work for a company that might be applying for a city project, disclose it. Transparency in city government is your friend. It inoculates you. It's that vaccine. The fellow people, your fellow board members, or on the school board, or your fellow counselors, then they are able to assess if that rises to the level of a conflict. The person is just a mid-level employee at a large company. They're not directly affected by the vote. They're just an employee, and that can be easily answered. But by bringing it forward, you've alleviated the problem for yourself. So state law says you can't be involved, you can't vote on a matter where you have a self-interest. But if you've disclosed it, the board can come to a conclusion that you don't have a conflict because the connection is so attenuated. Or your board may conclude that, in fact, gee, this is a little uncomfortable. We think you'd be best to abstain. In all likelihood, people are going to be grateful that you did that. And the matter still, I will almost guarantee, the vote that you're looking at will probably still turn out the way you wanted anyway, because the people are going to be grateful that you've disclosed this interest. So, again, the lesson point is transparency is always, always your friend. My wife worked for a small nonprofit in Portland. She was a finance manager. And every August, September, the auditors would come in. And they would go through those books like crazy. And Karen would be nervous. She'd be running around trying to, I want this report, I want that report. And I always say the same thing to her. Give them everything they want. Give them more. Give it willingly. Because to the extent you're transparent, that helps you. And sure enough, at the end of each year, audit report, finances are good, stamp on the document. And that became her inoculation. Those books were pristine. Think of it the same way. Disclosure, disclosure, get your inoculation, and you'll be fine. So that's pretty much how you're going to solve conflicts of interest. Face them head on. And you'll hear that voice, believe me. There won't be ambiguity in most cases. Another lesson point about ethics and conflicts of interest, and in fact the state statute talks about this and requires it. It's always best to err on the side of caution. So look, if there's any doubt in your mind, any ambiguity, don't act on it or bring it to the attention of the board. No one has ever been prosecuted for being too ethical. To the extent of my entire life, I've never heard of that happening. But there are lots of people who get prosecuted for not disclosing things and who act on things they shouldn't. So err on the side of caution. The state statute requires that you avoid even the appearance of impropriety. This is a standard lawyers have to face. Lawyers have to avoid even the appearance of a conflict of interest. And oftentimes it's the appearance that's worse than the reality. You all probably follow social media. You see how fast things happen, how fast a rumor gets spread, right? Because it's not the facts. They're going on the appearance of how something looks initially. So if there's an appearance that somebody's vested in something, that they're voting on something they might have a unique interest in, well, that rumor is going to get out faster, and people are going to be more responsive to it than before the actual facts come out. So that's why avoiding even the appearance of a conflict becomes so important, because people are highly reactive to appearance, and the facts tend to catch up later. And always, the facts are buried on page 3, right? The final story comes out later, when no one remembers it and no one's reading it. People remember the appearance. And so the state statute, which I'll send you, it's Title 30A, Section 2605, advises and suggests that we even avoid the appearance of a conflict of interest. And that's fundamentally the reason. The public needs to be assured that all of you are doing the right thing for them. You're not here for you. You were elected by the public, but you're not here to serve your own personal interests. You're not here to profit from government. You're serving their interests. They want that reassurance that you're acting above board, that you're acting in their interests. And that's what they get by that rule. We avoid the appearance that we're doing something in our own self-interest. Public, no one gets in trouble when they act a little bit too ethically. Now, a lot of ethical laws aren't simply civil suggestions to you. There's a whole body of state law that says ethical conduct, if not followed, can lead to criminal prosecution. So in the materials I'll send you tomorrow, there's at least 8 state statutes which make certain conduct criminal. Bribing a public official, trying to sell public office. So if I go to someone on a state legislative committee and I say, Charlie, I really would like to be a Superior Court judge. I know that open seat's coming up before your committee. How's $2,500 for your campaign? Would that help? Because I just care about your campaign, that's all. You can't buy public office. It's not allowed. You can't use your office for improper purposes. You can't use your office for personal gain. All of these can actually lead to you being prosecuted. So there's actual criminal code. Ethical violations can actually get you to the point where you're going to jail. I can tell you from experience, having worked with 2 lawyers who practice criminal law, and having followed the news on these topics on occasion, juries do not like public officials who end up in court. Okay, they have no sympathy for public officials. You probably remember, who was the governor of Illinois? Rod Blagojevich? Off to jail, right? Was this public official out there who tried to buy the Senate seat? Was it Jesse Jackson Jr.? I think he was trying to either buy or sell the Senate seat out there. The public has no sympathy for that. And fortunately, here in Maine, we're blessed, right? In large part, we have a long tradition of public officials who toe a really tight line and who set a good standard for everybody. We have not had a parade of public officials being let off to jail, because it's just not been the nature of our state. Well, we don't want it to be. And the state statutes tell us we're not going to be if we can help it. So we remind the public officials that there can be serious and significant adverse consequences if, in fact, we start down a bad road. Aside from state law, we have our city charter. We have city documents that require ethical obligations. So it's in the charter that, we talked earlier about the state statute, which prohibits you from being involved in a matter in which you have a personal self-interest. You have to avoid that conflict of interest. There's a similar statute in our city charter, and so that's arguably going to apply not only to the mayor and the councilors, but also to the school board, because you're essentially city officials. Even if our charter doesn't directly apply to you, if that argument could be made, the state statute's still going to apply to you. However, it is in our state, it is in the city charter that you, again, have to avoid matters in which you have an interest. And the charter talks about having at least a minimum of 10%. If you're less than 10%, you can arguably say, I'm allowed to vote on it because my interest is so de minimis. I would not go down that road. I wouldn't even risk it. If you have any interest, I would not get involved. So our charter tracks state law in that regard. I continue to recommend and I think you may be voting tonight on adopting what I would call aspirational ethical standards. We have a limited code of ethics that is in the city policies and procedures, but it mostly talks about the city administrator's obligations. Does not expressly appear to apply to the employees of the city. So you might want to consider that. The code that is laid out there is actually very interesting, and it's full of excellent principles. They're high-level principles that would not only should equally apply to Brian, but could apply to the city staff as well. The standards are such things as you'll do your best for the citizens. You'll be honest in the conduct of your affairs. So these are kind of high-level concepts that guide those who have the position of city administrator across the state. And there's no reason why those principles shouldn't equally apply from the person working at the front desk in the finance office, all the way up through the administrator. These are high-level aspirational goals that are appropriate ethical standards for everybody in the city organization. So I'd suggest to you that tonight, I think you're going to be voting on that document as one of the procedures and policies you adopt, that you think about expanding it beyond Brian's office to apply to all the city staff, because I went through them. I can send those principles to you, although I suspect you have them. But having gone through them tonight, they're an excellent, excellent guide point for all employees. There's some city code that talks about obligations. And actually, recently, we enacted 2 charter changes as well that arguably touch on ethical issues. And those are Section 902 of the charter. We added a provision that, for lack of a better term, I'll call the no lobbying provision. Once you leave office, you have a 1-year limit where you can't attempt to influence the body that you were before, either for profit or nonprofit purposes. And that was seen as a good idea to, again, limit the ability to unfairly affect an outcome. So that was recently added to the charter. A lot of the councilors had a direct hand in the writing and rewriting of that document. And I think it was an excellent standard to add. The other charter provision that got added was Section 9.03. And actually, this is helpful because it makes clear that we expect public officials to be ethical in their obligations, because it allows the city council to remove from city boards those individuals who are determined to have engaged in, quote, misconduct, criminal activity, or for violating the code of ethics or conduct of the city, or otherwise acting in violation of their oaths of office. So we now have in the charter a means by which those who are found to have been out of step in terms of ethics could be removed from their board or their body. Again, this is an effective way of stating a principle as an organization that all of you care about ethics and you expect that they be followed, both from boards, committees, and from staff as well, organizational, system-wide across the city. So these are good things for you to have done. I think they're appropriate additions to the charter. Again, I would recommend, as I have in years past, that we consider, a perfect example is, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Rotary. I know Councilor Hatch is, and I believe Councilor Berman may well be as well. In Rotary, we have something called the 4-way test. And these are sort of 4 principles that are supposed to guide the life day-to-day of a Rotarian. Such things as, is it the truth? Is it fair to everybody? Will it build goodwill among people? So these are high-level concepts that they're easy guides to help us on our way. When a matter confronts us, well, how do we handle it? Is it the truth, right? Is it fair to everybody? These are important but simply stated principles. And the city has really, for years, lacked that kind of aspirational standard, a guide. But now we're starting in different places to put it in. And so I applaud the council for doing that. My guess is the school board, you probably in your own policy manuals have something similar. But if not, again, I counsel the school board as well to think about aspirational standards. What do you want of yourself in terms of values and outcome? And I can assure you that the public expects nothing less. They want you to perform not simply skillfully, and that was Rob Biggs's charge, I think, tonight was, hey, do great work for the city. Absolutely. But as you do that, do it in a manner that's becoming of your office. There have been a lot of people, you're all the elected officials of the city. You're the collective wisdom of the city, right? You have to make all the decisions. And the citizens, that's a big amount of trust to place upon people. But they're doing that with an expectation that you're going to hold to values that they hold, that you're going to conduct yourself like mindful, serious statesmen and stateswomen, that you're going to accomplish things with a level of compassion and fairness that we expect of one another. And my guess is you've already all been doing that already. But should that question arise in the future, know that you have resources and people here who will help you work through it. Look, we've had a public official in the city of Saco in my tenure here was offered a $5,000 bribe to affect the outcome of subdivision permit. He immediately went to the FBI, and they immediately wired him up and then arrested the official. Not the official, they arrested the person who was making the bribe. So that's the kind of people we have here, good people and good results. But as you can tell, ethical issues and challenges will arise. You're up for the occasion. I know you are. And to the extent there's any ambiguity or opaqueness, talk it through with someone. School board has attorneys, you have a superintendent, the council has Brian's office and mine. So please don't hesitate to reach out. Not all of the questions are as clear as some offering you a $5,000 bribe. So if there's any opaqueness or ambiguity, any doubt, any question, let's get it resolved. And almost always transparency will solve the problem. How am I doing, Mayor? Oh, I'm at 5. Oh my goodness. Okay. I think it's because I just care more about the ethics than about FOA. I apologize. That's my own personal bias. Look, let's talk quickly about FOA. You all know that Maine has a law that requires public bodies to conduct their meetings openly. That's one aspect of the FOA. The other aspect is that public records of a local body or agency are also subject to being reviewed by the public. They're entitled to look at them. Now, these aren't unlimited authorities. So, for example, there's no doubt that if a question arises, the Maine Supreme Court has made it clear that the legislature wants us to err in favor of openness. But it's not unlimited openness. There can be times when confidentiality is required. The school board deals with a lot of matters involving children. Those records are not typically going to be available as part of a FOA. They're protected. Juveniles have a lot of protection. Some business records are confidential. Chief Clements and I deal with a lot of cases where people are looking for police records. Those are often confidential. So there are times and cases when not everything is subject to the FOA. It has to be looked at. But just assume as a general matter, courts tend to lean in favor of transparency and openness. Not always. You can also, in your public meetings aspect, as you all know, go into executive session. Very important. You can only do it for a proper reason. One of the reasons set out in statute: personnel matter, disciplinary matter, negotiations or acquisition of property, labor contracts, consultation with legal counsel. These tend to be the areas where you're allowed to go into executive session. Can't do it without a vote of 3/5 of the body that's present. So if you have 7 members, that means you're going to need 4. But what if you only have 5 members present? That's going to change the calculations on what the number is, the needed number to go into executive session. But always remember, you need 3/5 of those present to go into executive session. You all know you can only discuss the matter in executive session that's on the agenda. You can't stray into other areas that are just of curiosity to you, or you're interested in talking about them. You're not allowed to do that. And no action can be taken in an executive session. You can't make a decision. You have to do that publicly. Public's entitled to know what's going on in our bodies. So while you can do some things in private in executive session because there would be other interests that would be damaged, not all things can be done in private. Same with records. They're not always available. Sometimes they can be withheld. There's a public misconception that I'm entitled to every record in the city of Saco and give them to me now. It doesn't work that way. You're entitled to a couple hours of work. City staff will go get records for you. But after a certain amount of time, you have to start paying for it. And you also have to pay for the copies of the records. So it's not unlimited. And if a person comes back with repetitious requests, you can say, no, I'm not going to keep doing these. You got your original 2 hours, and we can limit you. Keep in mind, if 3 or more of you are involved in a matter, what may have been a private discussion can become a public matter. So another thing to keep in mind, if you're emailing, 3 of you are emailing, all right? You can suddenly take what was a private conversation and suddenly it can become essentially a public meeting. So 3 or more of you involved in anything, that's going to become a public meeting. And then at that point, the public's going to need to know about it. Actions that are done inappropriately in such a meeting could be challenged, so you don't want to go there. Actually, that's another important rule that I should have mentioned with regards to the ethics provision. If you in fact take an action that you shouldn't have voted on because you're tainted, you have a personal interest and you voted on it, that vote could be unwound, a contract could be unwound. So there are state remedies to unwind actions if a member of the board or body takes a vote that they shouldn't have. So there can be adverse consequences to both the city council or to the school board if in fact you shouldn't have acted on a matter. Keep in mind, even though meetings are open, you're still the elected representatives of the city. So the fact that a meeting is open does not mean the public can run the meeting or participate in the meeting. You still set the rules on when the public actually participates. They're your meeting, they're there. FOAA means they can come and listen and see and observe. It's not the same, it does not grant them necessarily the right to participate. You have public comment, the council has public comment, that's allowed participation. And if you have a public hearing on a matter, you're welcoming public participation. You want the public participation. But day in and day out, the public is not a member of your body. So you're not giving them a right to participate. They have a right to observe. And that's an important distinction to keep in mind, I think. Recordings are a fundamental part of FOAA. So since you're a public body and the public has a right to know what you're doing, you're obliged to record your meetings so that there's a complete either audio or video record of what's going on so that it can be reviewed down the road. We getting close, Mayor?
You got a couple more minutes.
Okay. So the FOAA serves important interests. It's allowing the public to see what you do. But keep in mind also that when, a warning to you, and this goes to those of you who really enjoy social media and Facebook or Snapchat or whatever platform you're on, that if you start conducting your city business on these accounts and in these forums, you could inadvertently make those activities subject to being disclosed, reviewed. We had a city councilor recently with regard to the matter on Lincoln Street where we had a FOA request because it was a controversial matter. He had conducted some of his business on his personal phone. If it's official business, even though it's on your personal phone, we can look at that. A FOA request reaches that. So you do have to be careful. And for the same reason that if 3 or more of you are discussing a matter on a social media platform, again, that's essentially could be a meeting. So you have to be extremely careful. I would encourage you, as I do every time I've been here, to stay off social media. I know none of you will do that. No one's as old-fashioned as I am. I don't do it. I can tell you from those of my partners who do divorce practice that one of the first places they go is social media. You don't want your comments about a matter to be found on social media. But they can be, and they could be used against you. Perfect example is when you're acting as a decision maker on a public matter, you don't want to have let your vote get out there or be known or what your position before the actual vote, because in many cases you're supposed to be acting as a neutral. So keep in mind that what you write or say, as a matter is coming to you, can be seen as either unfairly trying to taint or injure the process. And people will use that against you. With that, unless somebody has, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I know I've gone on quite a bit about the FOAA or about ethics.
Thank you, City Solicitor Murphy. Any questions for Tim from the council, from the school board members? Now's the perfect opportunity to ask any question that you have regarding FOIA or ethics.
And I thank you for your patience. It's always nice to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no other items on the joint meeting with the school board. School board chair, do you have anything that you'd like to bring forward this evening for the parties to discuss?
I don't have anything to bring forward this evening. Just a reminder that next Wednesday at 7 p.m. is our next school board meeting
Thank you very much.
here in the auditorium.
And for the council, in case you didn't watch the meeting before the holiday, School Board Chair LaFortune was reelected as chair, and School Board Member Richard was elected as the vice chair. So with that, thank you very much for coming tonight. I hope you got something out of the presentation. Please remember you can always feel free to reach out with any questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
That brings us to item B, which is a public hearing on Chapter 175, the Senior Tax Assistance Program. It's page 5 in your packet, and it's assigned to Councilor Hatch.
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. City staff have identified that there were not enough appropriate positions within the city to continue to support the senior work-off program. To ensure our most vulnerable residents can remain in their homes, this revision to Chapter 175 provides a match, the Maine Property Tax Fairness Credit, and a bridge to implementation of LD 1638, which is an act to help seniors and certain persons with disabilities remain in their homes. I move to open the public hearing.
Motion's been made by Councilor Hatch to open the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Johnston. Any discussion on open the public hearing? A roll call vote to open the public hearing. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to open the public hearing at 7:33. Public hearing is now open. For folks that wish to speak on this matter, please come forward and be heard. State your name and address for the record, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you.
That's going to be hard reading through all of this. You should have received earlier today a copy of what I have and questions. Everything is highlighted in red. So I start with, is this an ordinance or an article? And I ask this because throughout this document, it is referenced as an ordinance, an article, and other various documentation. And you really need to be consistent at what your word is. Second, is the credit towards the qualifying applicant's taxes, and that will come up later. Is council aware that the finance director will have to issue 1099s to the individuals receiving more than $5.99 per year? And that the IRS form Schedule C will have to be utilized by those individuals, and that will be the responsibility of the recipients. I go to page, sorry. Pages stick together. Question, definition of a program year. Is it April 1 through March 31st, or is it based on a fiscal year of July 1st through June 30th? There is a reason that I asked that question, and that is because my logic will follow as I continue. Then it says qualifying applicant, and they must be 10 years continuously. Well, first question I have, what happens if there's a medical issue and prevents the qualifying applicant from being in the home for half of a year because they're rehabbing? Are we not going to give them the credit towards their taxes? Has anyone thought of that process and made any decisions? Another question, how are you going to ascertain and verify rentals in Saco for 10 years? Rental units, landlords, etc. As one council member knows himself, he operates rental units. Can he honestly say he's had a tenant for 10 years? You know, so seeking verification from the landlords, you could have a person in 3 different units and still technically be qualified for this program. So this is not a well-written document. Additionally, question. Isn't the intent and purpose to help the senior citizens? If they have to pay the taxes in full, then you basically issue a check to them for the amount determined by the program administrator. Now, I did make a phone call to one entity. The other is not open except from 9 to 12, and I will not be able to get the answer, but the one person I spoke to today is you have to apply it as a tax credit against their taxes. You're not supposed to be refunding money except to the renters, because renters are renters. Where are the release forms? These are required to seek various entity information on if they received credits and did they rent in the community, et cetera, et cetera. All things that are important to administering this program. It's just like applying for food stamps or Maine Care. All of those items need authorization. I know, I'm close to 3 minutes, right? Then there's a piece that gives a deadline of, and this really throws me. In year 1 of the program, it says that the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022, the deadline to complete the application will be June 1st, 2022. Now the question becomes, how can an individual actually complete the form before February 2022 when the related tax forms have not been received and the filing of taxes to the IRS cannot be filed until January 31st, 2022 for the fiscal year 2021. Maine Revenue bases its information on the reports sent to Social Security and the IRS. So the question becomes, didn't the city accept applications in 2021, April 1st, for the fiscal year 2022, the current year, which would be payable? So if you took applications last April, you could use those applications to apply the tax benefit to the tax credit to the current year's taxes. Does that make logical sense, everyone? Or did I lose somebody? Why couldn't then you have, there's the determination of tax assistance. Wouldn't the program administrator determine the tax credit first? Can you actually issue a refund? Well, according to the state of Maine and according to one of the departments, it says, no, you cannot issue a refund. So that becomes the question of the renters. You need to figure out if you can include renters. And you talk about disabled people, but it's not anywhere mentioned in any of this. And then, question, should this be done in 2 parts? If you're doing it based on the current fiscal, doing it February 1st, the people have paid their taxes, which what you really could do is take 1/2 of the credit and apply it to the first half of next year. And if they sold their house, then you would not have to apply the second half. Okay? Because otherwise you're giving out a full tax credit. But if you do it based on the past, and I am told, and I will have an answer tomorrow from the Maine Revenue Service, if we legally can do that. Based on the property tax division, they thought that there would be no issue doing it that way. Always being 1 year, doing your application, paying it in the fiscal year of the upcoming one. And that way you would be always running concurrently, and then you would be applying those taxes correctly to the individual, which is the whole purpose of the senior tax credit, is to help our senior citizens. And then, if this is done as I have suggested, which is to do it in reverse of how it's done, it would be the administrator updating annually how many people received and all of that, and this is how much money was spent, so that you could do it for budgeting purposes and all of that. The other piece, and if you saw it, this was an easy one. The other piece is, if you have read this document, it is grammatically incorrect. There are a lot of issues with the way of consistency on how it's written. You go from Chapter 909 of 36 M.R.S., where it really should be 36 M.R.S., not Chapter 909. So the problem is, and then you have one word here versus another word here. I really believe somebody, and I've already given this to the city administrator once, and when you spell Maine, M-I-N-E, and it's still not been corrected, and I don't know how councilors didn't pick this up, this was passed on and none of the suggested corrections were made, and I actually have one with strikeouts and corrections so that it's written in a much better format and reads to suffice what you're attempting to do. So hopefully, you will think of tabling this document and having it rewritten correctly with all those thought processes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further public comment on Chapter 175, the Senior Tax Assistance Program? Councilor Hatch.
I move to close the public hearing and to set a final reading date of January 10th, 2022.
Motion's been made by Councilor Hatch. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Berman to close the public hearing and set final reading. Any discussion? Councilor Johnston?
Thank you. Obviously, we got some of that documentation late this evening, but if city staff could just address some of the things that Ms. Coleman presented to us before the final reading, that'd be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. City Administrator Canrath, can you make sure that staff provides a report to the City Council, maybe on some of the points that were made during the presentation? Any further questions, discussion? Roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 at 7:44. That brings us to item C, a public hearing, special entertainment permit for Saco Eagles, number 3792, and that is on page 10 of the packet, and that is assigned to Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. Fraternal Order of Eagles doing business as Saco Eagles, number 3792, has applied for a renewal of their special entertainment permit. Permit will be concurrent with their establishment's liquor license. Governor Mills, on March 17, 2021, signed a new legislation to extend the liquor licensure period by 90 days effective with renewal starting on March 18, 2021. This 90-day extension is based on the forced closure of in-person dining from March 18, 2020 through June 16, 2020. The applicant's new liquor license expiration date will be March 13, 2023. The applicant has paid all applicable permit fees, and the clerk has properly advertised the public hearing in accordance with the Saco City Code, Chapter 93, Entertainment, Section 93-2. I move to open the public hearing.
Motion's been made by Councilor Johnston to open the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor McPhail. Any discussion on opening the public hearing? Roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 at 7:46 PM. Public hearing is now open. Those wishing to speak on the item special entertainment permit for Saco Eagles Club number 3792, please come forward and be heard. Seeing nobody seeking recognition, Councilor Johnston.
Move to close the public hearing and be it ordered that the City Council grant the renewal application submitted by the Fraternal Order of Eagles doing business as Saco Eagles, number 3792, for a special entertainment permit to be concurrent with the establishment's liquor license. I move to approve the order.
Motion's been made by Councilor Johnston. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hatch. Any discussion? Roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 at 7:47. That brings us to item D, a one reading, and that is the update the rules in the order of business, page 13 in your packet. That is assigned to Councilor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pursuant to Article 2, Section 2.08B of the City Charter, the council is required to develop its own rules in order of business at the first meeting of the newly elected council each year. Changes were proposed and shared with the council at the December 13th, 2021 meeting under new business. The City Council hereby approves the recommended changes made to the rules and order of business as identified in Exhibit 1.
Motion's been made by Councilor McPhail. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Gunn. Discussion? Councilor Johnston?
Thank you. So I got a couple items. The first being, I think most of you are new or were new when the changes were previously made to the minutes, which occurred from the previous administrator, kind of on his way out the door. At that time, kind of just happened. There wasn't much input from council. I think several of you over the last 2 years have heard me, at least, say that there's issues that I've had with them, and they are relatively minor. I think that, again, without knowing really what the intent was of the administrator at the time, I would surmise that obviously he's probably trying to free up some staff time instead of typing out 86 pages or whatnot. But they were substantial in change from all the minutes that I've been familiar with, and really dating back to, as far as I could find, back to the 70s. Whereas it was very detailed, almost word for word. And again, I understand and can appreciate the desire or need not to have the city clerk or whoever typing those up. But my concern is always for the historical record of things. I know I myself, through the years, have always referred back to prior minutes, and one of the things I found very helpful in those minutes was that elements of the packets were included in there. And so here we are, and I understand we're now videoing things, and that's helpful. We have the transcript from YouTube, but one of the things I find that's still missing that I'd like to see added, and again, I don't know if this is really the proper forum, but it's the time that was afforded to me, so I'm just bringing this up now. I think realistically, it's probably best I work with the administrator to come up with some kind of minutes policy. But the thing that, again, that I always appreciated and found helpful was when we acted on something, a resolution, a contract zone, a zoning ordinance, as we recently did a couple weeks ago, whatever those amendments were incorporated into the minutes in the actual document, redlined version. So you could refer back and find out exactly when those actions occurred and what happened. I mean, I personally have found it helpful. It's something I've missed because I do tend to remember a lot, but having been here 8 years now, it's starting to get a little fuzzy up top. But I do know that, you know, there's members of the public that I've spoke to that also felt that it was a more transparent process. So that's something I'd like to see added back. I'm comfortable, I can accept the just action items. You know, that's really, we're probably one of the few communities left that we're doing it verbatim or thereabouts. The other thing I'd like to see is that with the minutes, we hyperlink them to the sections of the packet. Again, it's just a matter of transparency. So if you're looking through it and you're like, okay, I'd like to see the packet information, because oftentimes, as we know, we sit up here and we discuss items, but if you haven't actually read the packet, if you're a member of the public and you haven't read the packet, you don't really, you know, this is a different language to most. So being able to refer back to those packet items and reread them, you know, that's helpful. And then the last thing that I had a concern with, and perhaps it's already happening, but it's archiving and retention of this. So if we're going to rely on the video footage to be the detailed element here, how are we retaining that? Is it being archived? Is it being stored on YouTube? I don't know. I'm not exactly a tech guy either. So I would prefer, if possible, that we create a digital physical copy on a CD, on a thumb drive, and that also be stored. Because again, we can't predict the future of YouTube. Same with that transcript document. I can't tell you if YouTube will exist in 10 years or if they'll even be able to transcript it. So that's, like I said, something else I'd like to address. And as I stated, it's probably best I do so with a minutes policy, you know, working with the administrator. And it really should be, you know, citywide. Because one of the other issues I have found, you know, serving on a variety of these subcommittees or commissions, we all kind of do minutes differently. Some are very detailed, which again, I personally appreciate, but oftentimes you can't find them anywhere. So you go to the city website and it's very difficult to find what the Conservation Commission did, or the Energy Committee. And I know those those minutes are available to members, but they're not available to the public. So kind of streamlining that is my hope. And then the other item with the actual item before us, as far as the rules and order of business, under page 32 in the packet, I believe it is, we have general procedures. And this statement's been in here for a while, but I've never really understood what it meant. It mentions that the City Council has adopted by resolution a modified version of Robert's Rules. So I've been here on council for eight years, been actively involved with city government since really I was a child, and I've never once seen this modified version of Robert's Rules. I know of no resolution that a council adopted. I'm not saying they haven't, but regardless, this council has not adopted any modified rules. So, you know, that's reared its ugly head, in my opinion, from our city attorney over the last couple of years. I think that as a body, we need to have rules. So if it's modified, what does that mean? Can anybody sitting here tell me where to find a modified version of Robert's Rules that we've adopted? Because I'd like to read it so I'm informed. So, I mean, I guess with that, I would actually move to adopt the rules contained in the current edition of Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised as the City of Saco, or the Saco City Council's guiding rules for our meetings.
Thank you. So, City Council, the clerk still does the action minutes, which is required by charter, and that's just confirming the actions, the votes taken, who made the motion, when it was made, who seconded, and the votes. Those are called action minutes. Those are the way we've been doing it for a long time. Prior to City Administrator Sutherland leaving, there was a change. But the change wasn't in the action minutes. The change was that somebody who was doing the minutes put their own perspective on what happened into the minutes. So they're not true action-based minutes because they have some perception of the person typing the minutes. The verbatim transcript provided by the service is a much better tool. Now, I understand it doesn't come with the hyperlinks and so forth, and it's a little bit more cumbersome to navigate because you're navigating between two screens, the video and or the minutes, the verbatim minutes, and then potentially the action minutes provided by the clerk. So just so everyone's clear, we are following the process with our action-based minutes that the city has done for as long as I've been sitting here. What's changed is just what the person typing has put in there for their own perspective. Let's make sure we're very clear about that.
I think I was, Mr. Mayor.
So, excuse me.
Again.
Excuse me, Councilor Johnston, I have the floor. Thank you. The second piece of this that we would want to look at is Robert's rules. So if you actually went by Robert's rules, we would never get anything done at these meetings. A modified version of Robert's rules mean that you cater to the consensus or to the idea of what Robert's rules are, that it's fair, that everybody gets an option to speak, that nobody is taking advantage and always being the top speaker. It means that when you speak, before you can speak again, it's supposed to, by Robert's rules, go through every other person on this board or committee. Well, we know that doesn't happen. We know that sometimes you have counselors that don't want to say anything. So you bypass them. And that might mean that you go back to another counselor, which is in violation of Robert's rules. But it's a modified Robert's rules. So basically, you have an issue, it comes up, everybody gets an opportunity to speak on it and be heard on it, and then you still have to vote. Points of order are still in there, the motions, everything is in there except for some of the more elaborate positions of Robert's Rules of Order, which I'm not an expert. And I don't know of too many people that are, because there's so many additions that things have changed over the years, and I think that's why at one point the council went to a modified version to basically say, for a guide for the city council to make sure that everybody gets fair and equal treatment across the board on all issues. So those are the two issues, but I do think it's not a bad idea to have a policy, and I would tell you to send that to City Administrator Canrath, and he can develop a policy that we can adopt. I do think that's a good idea, but what I don't think is a good idea is spending a lot of staff time transcribing notes, especially for a well-paid staff that we have, to spend their time transcribing notes that you get out of a verbatim transcript. Those are just some of the points. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. Again, I think I was pretty clear that I have no problem with the way the action minutes have been taken. And while I agree, perhaps those minutes included a transcription that was done by someone's own opinion, I always found them pretty close to what occurred. But again, more importantly, it's the items that's missing from the packet, or the minutes from the packet as part of the minutes. And those, again, going back all the way to the 70s that I could find, were part of the minutes that council's approved. But again, like I said, I will take it up with the administrator. As far as the Roberts rules, I'm not advocating for sitting here and using Roberts rules, which largely applies to, rather large legislative bodies. But there's elements of Roberts rules that are important to follow, and we haven't. And I'm not saying it's you, Mr. Mayor, I'm just saying that oftentimes there's been an issue that has come up, and we say, or we had a legal opinion that says, oh, well, you guys don't really follow Roberts rules. So I'm asking, what are we following? Simple. If we want to come up with a modified version of our own, let's come up with that version. Not something that I'm told we adopted, because I can go back and talk to, the last 5 mayors, and they can all tell me that they always followed Roberts rules the best they knew how. Not, I chose to make that decision the way I did because we make our own rules, which is a comment I've heard. In fact, it's in an email. So we can go back and refer to, being told not to put things in emails, but it's in an email. So I made a motion. It should be before council, whether or not they want to adopt the current edition of Robert's Rules.
So Councilor Johnson has made a motion to
Adopt the rules contained in the current edition of Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised as the Saco City Council's guiding rules for our meetings.
and we will all need to go take a class on Robert's Rules because that's going to be very cumbersome when you start adding in. The reason why the modified rules are there that have been adopted by every council since I've been on this council is because you're basically taking the gist of Robert's Rules and condensing it down to the fairness attributes. You're still doing points of order. You're still following the procedures. You're just not making sure that the sergeant of arms doesn't take somebody out because they spoke inappropriately. I mean, that's how far Robert's Rules goes down if you really dive into the all-intense version of Robert's Rules. Now, I would say that council should look at putting something in there if there isn't something that somebody hasn't seen, because that does happen, that we can put something in there next round, but I wouldn't change it now on something that we're all going to have to go get trained on for the simple purposes of introducing more concepts. But you have made a motion to use the regular Robert's Rule of Order as the guide for the City Council in an amendment to the current rules and order of business. Is there a second?
I'll second for discussion.
Second by Councilor Archer for discussion. Discussion?
I have discussion.
Councilor Archer?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I definitely see both of your points. When we say modified Robert's Rules, that doesn't exist. It's not a book.
Exactly.
So I do believe that we need to have some kind of written procedural, how do we interpret Robert's Rules and what is it? I also agree that we probably shouldn't just be voting on adding the current Robert's Rules addition, because yes, it doesn't, we would be then having to use that 100% for all of our procedures at the moment. So I do see both sides. So I won't be voting to incorporate that, but I do believe we need a written document on what does modified, because it's not abridged, it doesn't exist. We just call it a modified version. And the way I look at Robert's Rules is it clearly defines how the meeting will run, and it also protects the minority in times when you go to the document itself, and this is how we're supposed to do it. The way to do it, the way we've kind of done it, is where we look at it and then we decide, okay, does it apply or not? Are we going to listen to it, or are we not going to? Are we going to disregard it? It then caters to the majority. So I have a problem with that, but if you can define it to create it, talk about where it applies, where it doesn't apply, I think that would be the most beneficial to this council and future councils. But again, I don't think we need to incorporate the current the current version of Robert's Rules, only because, yeah, I would have to bring out my copy at the house and definitely reread it myself, because, I mean, it's a book. So there are parliamentary lawyers. Their whole career is related to parliamentary law. So I do recognize where it could be a barrier, especially over the next couple months. So again, let's define what modified means and get that drafted in a written format. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Councilor Purdy, then Councilor Berman. Councilor Purdy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to echo what Councilor Archer said, and yeah, I think the areas that we may have to look at are places where we've bumped into problems. One thing that comes to mind is forgive me, I'm trying to get the right term here. When we were trying to bring an item back to be revoted on, which was, I believe, allowed by Robert Rules, but not by the Rules and Order of Business. So, yeah, areas where there's conflict or gray area are probably the areas that we really need to look at when we draft some sort of a modified version. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Berman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I agree the document's not perfect. I'm confused by some of the confusion. The way I read this document, the modified version of the Roberts Rules of Orders are the paragraphs that follow that paragraph. It defines the presiding officer, it defines the seating arrangement, it defines how we sign city documents, it defines the quorum, the discussion rules, how one obtains the floor, how one asks questions, how comments go to the record, who can interrupt who under what situations, how long discussion can last, how things get tabled, how you protest, how you move the question. Those are exactly the things covered in Robert's Rules of Order. Although I agree, I'm embarrassed that my copy is not here with me. It usually is in my bag, that Robert's Rules of Order is a book and not a several-page document. But in my mind, the clear meaning of the modified version of the Robert's Rules of Orders is this document. And we can continue to modify this document to clarify those issues that have come up that are not adequately addressed here. But this, I think, is the document that does that, and those are the modified rules of order that then follow.
Thank you. Councilor Hatch.
I would agree with Councilor Berman's observation. Let me just offer up maybe an oversimplification of solving this issue, but if we can just take that sentence that says, by resolution, the City Council has adopted a modified version of Robert's Rules of Order, and wordsmith it to say that that becomes the default document if something is not clear within the resolutions that we are working with. And that way, it only becomes a fallback for something that we haven't potentially appropriately identified in our procedures that we see here. Because I would agree, I read it the same way you read it first time I went through. So I don't know if a simple wordsmithing of that sentence could solve our problem here.
Thank you. Councilor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to piggyback a little bit on what some of my fellow councilors have said. It was my interpretation as well that the following verbiage after the modified rules implied what the modified rules were. Now, that being said, I would think that most of the public can agree to some degree that our flow of our meetings are relatively easy to follow. We discuss things, we oftentimes will throw amendments out, and we'll table things if we need to discuss it further. If the one thing we never abandoned at all is what's called points of order, where someone just wanted to bring the meeting to a halt and say, hey, wait a minute, is this how we should be doing this? Now, that's why we pay a city solicitor, as he said, to call balls and strikes. Now, if other councilors have particular instances where they think there should be specific deviations or clarifications from Robert's rules as to make the meeting flow a little easier, or to Councilor Archer's point, protect the minority from the majority, or vice versa, then to other councilors' points, perhaps it's something that we should like we would on any piece of legislation during the three-meeting process, oftentimes forward our thoughts and ideas to the mayor and the city administrator so staff could look them over to clarify the document. But aside from that, I think the meetings flow just fine. And like I said, as long as we respect the points of order, which this mayor and any previous mayor has, then these meetings remain fair to all the participants and certainly to the crowd. Thank you.
Councilor Johnston, then Councilor Purdy. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad this was able to bring about some discussion, because that was really the overall intent. And while I can, see what councilors have stated as far as what follows, it's really lacking as far as what's in Robert's rules as far as the order of things. There are an abridged version of Robert's rules. That's an actual thing, not modified. Perhaps we adopt that. Perhaps we take elements that we find appropriate and come up with our own. But I think to Councilor Archer's point, the real, or at least one of the ways I view Robert's rules, is to ensure that everybody does feel they had a fair opportunity or whatnot. And it does tend to protect those on the minority side, which is important. So again, that's, I've seen this through the years where it says modified version that we've adopted, and I've never been a part outside of adopting this council rules of orders and procedures each year. No one's ever brought up Robert's rules, just modified version. Yeah, as I stated, every mayor that I can think of, the last 5 or 6 of them, have always, followed Robert's rules to the best of their abilities, because, as we've stated, a lot of it doesn't apply to begin with, because we're only a 7-body, 7-member body to begin with. So thank you.
Councilor Purdy.
Thank you. I'm just wary of adopting the version when frankly I'm not a parliamentarian, and I don't think anybody else here is either. And so, don't think anybody knows exactly what's in the entire book. So, I can't support the motion. I'd prefer to leave things the way they are. As Councilor Berman had stated earlier, I always kind of assumed the modified version was what was written in the rules and order of business. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Berman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councilor Purdy. However, there are a couple of issues just in my 1 year on council that have come up, such as whether a motion can be considered twice in 1 year, or whether we can reconsider a motion, to which the authority of the council to do so has been referenced by Robert's Rules of Orders, but I don't see them in this document here. So I think Councilor Hatch is correct that the relationship between these documents and Robert's Rules should be made clear, and perhaps a reference to Robert's Rules as an underlying document to which we can refer when our modified rules are silent may be appropriate and clarify some issues.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the amendment? On the amendment only? On the amendment, roll call vote on the amendment. Councilor Archer?
No.
Councilor Purdy?
No.
Councilor Gunn?
No.
Councilor Berman?
No.
Councilor Hatch?
No.
Councilor McPhail?
No.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
The motion fails 6-1 on the amendment. Back to the main motion as not as amended. Any further discussion? Councilor Berman?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm uncharacteristically not well prepared. I have more of a concept than specific languages. But I'll note that in the table of contents, number 8 refers to city council meetings and workshop. And if then you go to that section, under regular council meetings, about 4 lines in, that's now section 791, it refers to joint meetings and workshops, which will start at 6:30 before the start of regular meetings. However, if we go down a little bit further into now section D, order of business, we will find an item labeled new business, number 10, which replaces the former workshop format. So A, I think there's some inconsistencies in this document about whether or not we should have workshops to discuss new business and concepts. And then my plea is that I think from time to time we should. I think new business is relatively rigid in formatted as evidenced by our discussion about Robert's rules. And some less formal discussion, perhaps not bound by Robert's rules, perhaps in a more amenable format, especially when meeting with other bodies such as the planning board or school board, may really facilitate dialogue and discussion as opposed to impeding it. And I think those things could be videotaped, they could be minuted, they could be released to the public and kept transparent, which I understand was the intent of new business, but still allow a less formal, more free-flowing, less regimented discussion that may help us come to consensus and improve our ideas by the time they're ready for the agenda. And so the concept, but not the specific language, is that I would like to find a way to bring workshops back onto the agendas from time to time when new ideas merit them.
Thank you. And the moving the joint meetings with other boards and committees was something I'd asked Brian to put in here because the feedback that I got was some of the boards and committees didn't like being called to the principal's office. So the idea here is that we would do a joint meeting from 6:30 to 7:30 and then start the actual council meeting at 7:30. That way it's still going to be run in the same accordance of the policies, the rules and order of business that you're putting into place. So I would still be the presiding officer over the joint meeting, but it offers a little bit of sense of security for folks that they're not being called to Big Brother's office. That's kind of why that language is in there. Workshops, I think, again, the whole idea on workshops were previously not televised. The idea when I took, the office of mayor, transparency was key. So putting new business in there, giving the council the option to make things happen on any given night that they meet, made sense to me. And it also became more transparent because it's going out to the public live stream and broadcasted. So it became more transparent. However, on things such as marijuana, it might be helpful to add in a special meeting for a workshop if we see items like that come down the road, rather than not just make it every month have a workshop, that we put in a workshop when it makes sense, or when we can call for a special workshop to talk about different issues. And I think we should take that as a case-by-case basis moving forward. But that's just my thought. Councilor Hatch.
Well, I would personally agree with that thought. I agree with Councilor Berman as well. I think that the workshop tool should be worked back into the mix on a selected basis. I'm not even suggesting a constant scheduling, but when the topic dictates that we should have a chance to just discuss. However, I want to be sensitive to the transparency and the fact that if we do have a workshop, it has the same public access that a council meeting has. And if that's problematic from a technology standpoint, then I personally am willing to try to work with the new business element of a normal meeting. But I would really like to try to attempt to get some workshops into the mix. And on two other issues, real quickly, I wanted to dovetail on Councilor Johnson's comment about hyperlinks in the minutes. I have personally had to go back through some minutes of other meetings, both for this body and for the planning board, and I would find myself actually taking the time to go back to the recording so I could get the gist of the conversation. So I don't know, again, I'm not a techie person, but a hyperlink in the minutes, if it's possible, would probably be a really worthwhile effort. And I also wanted to express equal concerns about the archiving, and I suspect that IT has some sort of backup process and storage process in place, but I think Brian, if you could just assure us that that is happening, that would be helpful to
So
me.
after the snafu in 2016, the items are archived on a shared drive
Good.
For the city, as well as hard copies of the action minutes by Michelle, the city clerk, are still kept. So hard copies and the recordings are both kept. Councilor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is more of a question for administration, really more for the public's benefit. If the council were to decide to re-implement a standalone workshop, whether it was occasional-based or semi-regular, would there be any legal impediment to having it, as Councilor Hatch had mentioned, be part of the public record as any other meeting would be? Because to the mayor's point, prior to 2016, when it was standalone workshops and it was just done in a closed auditorium where anyone could show up, but the public wasn't able to see it, though. That was one of the reasons we put the workshops in the meetings in the first place, was so no one could ever say that the council was hiding behind procedure on things and everything was in the public view. So if we were to have standalone workshops, would there be any impediment to them being on television or YouTube or what have you, but like any other meeting?
Yeah, the short answer is no. I think we could certainly have a workshop sitting here on camera, same amount of public transparency. It is, of course, an open public meeting. There's no reason why we couldn't have it on camera, the same as these. I think the intent of some of the discussion is really just to foster a meeting where there's some more sort of organic discussion that's less scripted, that's less part of a typical agenda, and we have an opportunity to really get in depth on some of these more complicated issues, such as marijuana. But yeah, there's no reason we couldn't sit here and do the same thing as far as transparency, cameras open to the public, et cetera, and we just label it a workshop, and the format is different, the agenda is different, to allow for more sort of in-depth and organic discussion among you, the councilors.
Thank you.
Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I agree with most of what fellow councilors have said. I certainly found the prior format more conducive to bringing items before council as a councilor. It was less rigid. I'm not, necessarily saying we have to bring that back. I think that perhaps it might work under new business. If we had an item that was just open for that, discussion, because that, in my opinion, has been lacking. I've been frustrated at many turns now where I've asked for items to be included on agendas and they're not being. So if that's the way to go about it, then I'd support that. In the past, I've also viewed and advocated for the addition of council discussion for that very purpose. It's not well defined what council discussion is either. Either way of going about it, whether it's bring back workshops, maybe it's once a month, that's how we used to do them unless more were needed, or just moving forward with the new business and adding an agenda item that allows for council to throw ideas out or requests out. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilor Hatch.
Just a point of clarification, so the motion on the floor approves, and would that include any of the recommended changes that we've discussed, or is it more appropriate to table? Now, this is a question, not a motion, but is it more appropriate to table the vote, giving staff an opportunity to make the revisions that we've discussed and bring it back for a final vote? And that's just a general question.
So the answer to that question is no amendments have been put forward and passed, so therefore you are voting to approve the rules and order of business as they stand today. That doesn't mean that you cannot fix them or amend them as you see fit throughout the year, but currently you are voting on the amendments as they are. And as I've stated, we will make sure to incorporate workshops, televised workshops, on important matters related to the city. We will do that maybe in place of one of the meetings for that month or something of that nature. But that will be brought to you, folks, for approval under the consent agendas, as we've been doing every month of what the next month's schedule will look like. So if that's okay, if there's no objection from council, we will do it that way moving forward. Hearing no objection, okay. So with that, any further discussion on the minutes as they are today? Roll call vote on the minutes, or excuse me, on the motion for the acceptance of the council rules and order of business. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Hatch.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much, everyone. That brings us to item 10. There is no new business this evening. Item 11, administrative update. City Administrator Kinrath.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. An update on the looming federal vaccine mandate. We are currently working on implementation of the federal COVID vaccine mandate for organizations, as you know, with more than 100 employees. In the coming weeks, all staff will be given direction on how to show proof of vaccination or be instructed on the new weekly testing protocols for those who are unvaccinated. We aim to have this system in place by the February 9th deadline. All staff will need to recognize that they must share their vaccine status with our HR department. Recognizing the controversial nature of some of this mandate, and understanding that there are still legal challenges taking place, we do appreciate everyone's cooperation as we bring the city of Saco into compliance with the current federal guidance. And I know for some this is going to be maybe difficult, but this is something that we as a city must do, that we need to do, and we will do. And so we're asking for everyone's cooperation as we go through this process and continue to navigate this COVID-19 pandemic. So thank you to all for your cooperation. The Rendezvous Point National Register of Historic Places designation did go through, and as of December 8th, 2021, the National Park Service has designated our Rendezvous Point burying ground as an official item in the National Register of Historic Places, and we'll be receiving a certificate forthcoming. Just a quick announcement of a public works bid opportunity. The City of Saco is soliciting bids for the Route 1 Sidewalk Extension Project, Funtown Parkway to Spring Hill Road. Bids must be submitted on the bid response form in a sealed envelope marked Route 1 Sidewalk Extension Project. Bids will be accepted until 1 p.m. on a Wednesday, January 26, 2022, at the Saco Public Works Department, located at 15 Phillips Spring Road, Saco, Maine. There will be a public opening of all bids received at that time. A pre-bid conference will be conducted on Wednesday, December 19th at 10 a.m. At the Saco Public Works Department. Contractors are encouraged to attend this pre-bid conference. However, it is not mandatory. An addendum summarizing questions raised at the pre-bid conference will be issued by the city engineer. Thank you.
Thank you, City Administrator Kinrath. Brian, on the RFP for bids for the sidewalk extension from Funtown to Spring Hill, is that part of the bond that we passed in 2017? Is that the finalization of that bond?
I believe it is, but I would want to confirm on that. But I believe so, yes.
I just wanted everyone to understand why we were doing that process, and it is part of a bond that was passed by the community. And I want to say it was in 2017, 2018. So, any questions for City Administrator Kinrath? No questions. Moving on. Council discussion and comment. Any council discussion and comment this evening? Councilor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to piggyback on City Administrator Cainrath, I wanted to give my congratulations and props to current and former members of the Historic Preservation Commission, to which I'm the liaison, for all their tireless work in getting Rendezvous Point burying ground to this point where it is now on the registry of historic places nationally, and it's a nice piece of Saco's heritage that's now going to be protected going forth, and hopefully over the next coming years, we can clean up the site a little bit, make it a little easier for public access, but this is a wonderful piece of Saco's heritage and history that we still continue to learn a lot more about in terms of who's buried there, how far it goes back, and I invite anyone who's interested in it to contact HPC as we go forward, because next couple of years, though, we'll be able to open it up a little easier for people to get down there and see what this nice piece of Saco is. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Berman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have really two requests for the city administrator. One is approximately a year and a half ago, maybe slightly more, the city council enacted a declaration of climate emergency that required 2 reports to the council, one on training available to employees to combat climate change, and the other steps being taken by the city to combat climate change. And I would appreciate it if council could receive those reports when convenient. Second, some of my coastal constituents are asking about our efforts to combat climate change, in particular where we stand with the Army Corps of Engineers project and any progress made on that, as well as any progress being made on a regional dredge and a role the city might play on that. So if those could be included in a future administrative update, perhaps at the next meeting, I would greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilor Berman. I can touch on 2 of those items. The county government will make a vote in April, early April, on whether or not to approve the funding for a community dredge. Whether it will be Saco's community dredge or whether it will be a multi-governmental agency dredge, much like BSOB is to us for transportation, that is still unknown. The city is still working with other communities to try and establish what that might look like to present to the county for their final consideration in April. So I hope that answers one of your questions. The other question is, we have not heard anything from the Army Corps of Engineers. We should be expecting something end of this month, beginning of February from them, and then we will move forward from there. So those are 2 of the questions. The other one Brian can touch upon. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. So it's come to my attention by members of the public, but also me personally. At the end of the month, dog registrations are up. Trying to get a vet appointment right now is near impossible. As I found out recently, I usually do the 3-year shot for the rabies, and I didn't really think about it until the other day. I got the card in the mail and was like, oh, I got to register the dog, and of course, I can't get an appointment until mid-February now. So with us charging, I think it's $25 late fees, perhaps we might want to waive that. I mean, me personally, if I have to pay it, I don't really care, but considering the registration is $6, seems like a exorbitant fee to pay if we can avoid it. So just with the thought of other dog owners in mind, we might want to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnston. City Administrator Kenrath, can we put that on one of our next agendas to ask the council to waive the penalty fees for late dog registrations for a period of 6 months to be then relooked at and see where we are down the road? Is that fair enough? Okay. So, council, you will see that coming before you. Any further council comment and discussion? Okay, moving on. Item 13, is there a motion to move into executive session?
Be it ordered that the City Council enter into executive session pursuant to M.R.S.A. Title I, Chapter 13, Subchapter 1, Subsection 4056, Economic Development.
Motion's been made by Councilor McPhail. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hatch to enter into executive session. Any discussion? Roll call vote to enter executive session. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 70834 to move into executive session, which will be downstairs in the conference room, and we will have a 5-minute recess prior to going into executive session. But it will be downstairs in the conference room. Okay, we're all back. Is there a motion to exit executive session?
So moved.
Counselor McPhail, is there a second?
Second.
Counselor Hatch on the second. Any discussion on exiting executive session? Roll call vote to exit. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 at 9:48 to exit executive session. Is there a report from executive session? Counselor Johnston?
The City Council, after reviewing the recommended proposals for the sale of 14 Phillips Springs Road and 16 Phillips Springs Road, Council authorized the city administrator to negotiate a purchase and sale agreement with the businesses and developers of the proposal that represents the highest and best use for the properties and had the highest price.
Motion's been made by Counselor Johnston. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor McPhail. Any discussion? Roll call vote. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. That brings us to item 15. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Counselor Hatch, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor McPhail. Any discussion on adjourning? A roll call vote to adjourn. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes to adjourn at 7-0 at 9:49 PM. Take care, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.